Good morning, everybody, and let us continue our exploration of the Rig Veda and Vedic view. Now in the perspective of change and self-development. Many scholars thought that there is no concept of change in the Veda, that it is very static and has no evolutionary concept of evolution, and so on and so forth. And by the way, this idea that there is no development is taken rather from the later development of Mayavadic vision, where it is really more static and there is no development. Development in a sense as the embodiment or manifestation, which is quite different in the Veda. In the Veda, it is the very key, is the manifestation which is taking more and more place in matter. And that was the concept of the sacrifice. It's not static, it's absolutely dynamic, and it has the developmental approach to reality. By the way, many also thought that in Buddhism, for example, also there is no development. It's very static view, which is explaining to us how things are and how to get out of it. So how to get into the nirvanic consciousness and to be free from nature. To stop all our sanskaras and all our involvement with the nature. By the way, it went so far that it became our, so to say, a paradigm or the worldview, especially in India. Not only Buddhism contributed to it, but also Advaita Vedanta to a certain extent. And even I remember somebody was quoting very beautiful, I forgot her name, actress and dancer and musician, when she was asked the question what she would like to achieve in this life, she said that I would like to never come back to this life again. And that's exactly that paradigm of leaving life and going out of it into some other state of being, where things are not changing. And it's quite interesting that such a beautiful, how to say, person who could manifest so much would think about this. So we can see clearly how this paradigm is determining our thinking. But it is not the same as it was in the Veda. In the Veda we have absolutely different paradigm. There is no even concept of mukti in the Veda, at least in the Rig Veda. If you think about it, you will be surprised, what is there then? If there is no mukti, there is nobody to be freed from the grip of nature. Mukti. Mukti is the freedom. There is another word, moksha. In English, what do you call it otherwise? Liberation. So what is there then? What is this self-development or change in the Veda? Now, what is interesting, I started to think about it. Usually we think about change and self-development in the individualistic terms, yes? By ourselves, by our creativity, we will come to certain quality of being. And that ideal is, we can trace it back to Buddhism and also even to the beginning of the mental structure. I am referring again to these structures of consciousness because mental structure appeared approximately 500 BC all over the world. In Greek civilization or in India we have Buddhism, Jainism. These are all monotheistic religions. They are all coming with this new view on things where the individual is the center. And Buddha says, create for yourself an island in Dhammapada. create for yourself an island which nobody can touch or disturb. Neither gods, nor demons, nor human beings. You will be as strong as yourself. You have to be strong and separate from the world. You have to express your self-qualities. And the same we have in the Gita. Uddharet atmanatmanam natmanam avasadayet. One should support oneself by oneself. One should not let oneself down by oneself. Because oneself is the friend to oneself, and oneself is the enemy to oneself. Now, this is the beginning of thinking which we all inherited from that time, and that's why for us very difficult to come back to the Vedic view where the view is vaster than ourselves, separate selves. By the way, the whole development which was presented to us in Yoga Sutras is of the same kind. It is about the individual who is following certain discipline, and yama niyama, we can say it is dealing with behaviorism, so to say, taking behavior as the help. So you modify behavior in order to become able to concentrate at the end, to concentrate your consciousness. You have to modify behavior, not other way around. So you first modify behavior, then you modify your way of being in the physical, in the vital, and then you become able to concentrate the mind. It's a very methodological approach to the individualistic development, but not the same in the Veda. Very different. So one type of development is this growth of individual through his own force, creativity. Now we all believe in creativity, and why not? There is something in us which is the divine spark which permits this development. But we do not see the bigger picture because of that. We become completely restricted by our mind to certain individualistic approach to reality. So in the Veda it was different. It was the invocation of the higher forces of consciousness. Invocation of the higher, vaster, universal forces of consciousness into the individual frame. If we broaden our perspective, we will see that actually it is what it is. It is not that we are separate from the whole world, but we are part of the whole world. So this was pre-mental structure of mythical and magic and even archaic stage of our development, where we saw that we are part of the whole. So the sacrifice then, the concept of the sacrifice, is the vaster view on reality. Huh? Yes, definitely. The question is about Purusha Suktam. What about Purusha Suktam in the 10th mandala? It is not the same as invocation of the forces into the individual frame, because Purusha himself was sacrificed. This was the universal Purusha, not individual who was sacrificed, and that is the difference. That actually justifies all those invocations, because these forces, these devatas, or these faculties of the universal Purusha are shared by all individuals. Aitareya, by the way, gives us very good insight into this Purusha Sukta. It explains what really happened, how the sacrifice took place. Because when Purusha the universal Purusha was sacrificed, so to say, concentrated upon with the consciousness of the self, yes, then his faculties broke forth, yes. His mouth broke forth, from mouth, speech, and I was already mentioning that from speech, fire was born. So all these, his eyes broke forth, from eyes, sight, from sight, light, the sun was born. His ears broke forth. So his capacity to hear, and from that hearing, and from hearing space was born. So all this, what we see as space, light, is because there is a need to see, to hear, or to communicate indirectly, not through the touch, or direct touch with a being, and so on and so forth. These devatas, these faculties, are born out of universal Purusha, and then they plunged into the darkness of that first fall, which I was mentioning, into the inconscient ocean. And there they started to look for their place to abide. They wanted to live somewhere, and there was no place, so they slowly build up the unit, so to say, in evolutionary process where they can dwell. And the human body, according to Aitareya, was suitable for them, more suitable than animal bodies. And they said, it is well done, sukritam bhateti, it is definitely well done, and they entered him. So the fire entered the speech and entered his mouth. The light, the sun, entered the sight and entered his eyes. Now this is how individual was created. Individual is the projection of that universal Purusha in the midst of nowhere, so to say, building up that unit which can carry those faculties. This is the sacrifice. This is another way of description of the sacrifice. Very beautiful. And in that sense, it is not contradictory to the invocation of those universal forces, because these devatas are the faculties of consciousness. So this vast view on reality, where you are not cut off and depend only on your own decision, and you're responsible for everything what is happening to you only, exclusively, but there are also forces which you have to invite, engage for your development, is actually an interactive view, and interacting with the vaster world. Not only outwardly, but also inwardly. It seems that inside we have a vaster world, about which we know very little because we became very dependent on our individuality. It makes sense. If we would really widen our perspective, we will see that the inner worlds are much vaster than outer worlds, actually. There is also one more interesting view on the sacrifice, and it is also in the Gita, where Sri Krishna says that he, among all, he is adhiyajna. He is the one who is responsible for the sacrifice. He is the one who enjoys all the sacrifices, all the offerings of all the beings, whether they know it or not. They think they sacrifice to some other creatures, but all the sacrifices anyhow come to him. And that is also confirmed in Uttarpara speech by Sri Aurobindo, when he came out of the Alipur jail, and he said that Krishna showed him the reality that actually everybody does the work of the Supreme, even those who are fighting against him. They are also unknowingly doing his work. And he explains how it is. He says that egoistically they may think that they do something for themselves. They want this particular result. But on the way to get that result, on the way, they will do all the work assigned by the Supreme. They may reach their goal or may not reach their goal at the end. Suppose somebody wants to become a millionaire. He will put this kind of task for himself. and he will go for it fully. But to reach there, he will do many, many things. And those things will be arranged and rearranged by some higher overviewing consciousness which needs certain results. So he will be used, basically. He will not know it, but he will be used by that consciousness to achieve its goals, and whatever will be the result for himself, for his egoistic perception of things, that may he got the goal or not, it's another matter. And Sri Aurobindo says about the nature in the same way, that the nature actually gives us only that which is absolutely necessary for its functioning. And she doesn't care about our demands and our, expectations from it. So it gives only what is absolutely indispensable for us to function. That's why it is so difficult to get something egoistically out of this world. But the sacrifice was another view. There was no egoistic demand. There was an invitation of the higher forces of consciousness which are supposed to come and to manifest the divine in the individual frame. That's why it is very easy. It's just the opposite of that, what is done egoistically. That's why the asuras are doing it with such a force. They have to be much more powerful than the gods to do the sacrifice, because they are always going against the flow. Yeah?
So that ultimately we are, each one is fulfilling the greater expectation of the Supreme, indirectly or indirectly. But then we also talk about the devas who are, they're looking up to the devas or they're looking up to the Dasus in the Vedic story. Then the Supreme is over and above there, that in spite of devas or Dasus, whether we're fighting for the devas or we are...
Yes, they always come to Vishnu or Shiva to ask for help. That's always happening in Puranic stories, which is very interesting. Yes, he is not involved. He is helping devas more than asuras, but asuras also can take a very particular place and can be given powers over gods and asuras and all the world. Many times it happened, because with their tapasya, with their effort, they can really achieve it. You see, we are looking at it from within we are very small beings, and we see asuras are bad, or rakshasas are bad, and gods are good. But for the divine view, it's a very small scale, asuras and gods. It's a small scale, yeah? It's just here happening. As Mother says, whatever you do the best or whatever you do the worst is on a very small scale. Actually, it doesn't matter much if you look at it. It really doesn't matter. It's just here. And if you look at it from the vaster perspective, all our choices are very small choices. We think they are big, important, but they are really not so important, because whether you go that way or this way, sorry to tell this, you will be still doing His work. If you think about it, it liberates you from many problems. It liberates you also as a psychotherapist and psychologist. You will not judge people who are kind of going astray, because basically they have to explore certain corners of reality. Once I had an interesting vision. I saw very poor people, kind of poor in consciousness also, drunken people digging the soil, making these, cables or something. They were working hard and they were having cursing language, and they lived very basic, low-level life. And I thought, how these people come to that bigger picture of reality? What do they really do here? Where is their utility? And I had a glimpse. Actually, they are those who dared to go into that darkness and narrowness of consciousness, into that miserable state. They bring their souls into that darkness. And I thought, why is that necessary, really? And then there is a very mysterious statement in the Bible, by the way, which is, Jesus says, those who are the last will be the first in the kingdom of my Father. And it just struck me. Those who are the last, the most, how to say, in the lowest level of consciousness, will be the first in the kingdom of my Father. It started to make sense to me, because they bring consciousness deep into the inconscient, into the subconscious. They become the vehicles or the connection to the consciousness to really penetrate into that darkness. They lose themselves there. They become something else. They lose the quality of life. But they are sacrificed to enter that darkness and to be the agents of light in that dark spot. Just think about it. It liberates us from this judgmental of what is good or bad. Nothing here is good or bad. It is all about manifestation of the divine in matter. And in that sense, Veda has a solution, a vision which can solve these problems even philosophically.
The example which you took can also be interpreted in a different way. It is also seen that when a person who doesn't have, say, money and other facilities, when he starts taking it, then he is no longer the last man. He tries to become the first man.
Right.
So,
And then he will be the last in the kingdom of his Father. It's true. And that's what Jesus said.
this saying that the last man will be the first in the kingdom of my Father, probably means something else.
Can mean something else. I'm using it for my own interpretation, and it makes sense to me even today. But it may change. Yes, things change. These texts are very charged with meaning. And I'm not really referring to Christianity in general. I'm not supposed to do it. But I did it just for the sake of giving you the glimpse what I had. Yes? It came from this statement. It's not necessary. I agree even with that ethical view. This is already ethics entering. And but you see, in the utility of raw, so to say, material, when you enter the darkness, really enter, it's not necessary. You begin to enter the deepest darkness with full consciousness. Yeah? But when you enter it without consciousness, you are losing yourself more and more. And in the hymn of creation, Nasadiya Suktam, it is also said, and I mentioned this, who knows where this creation comes from? Gods came later. This darkness was already there. Who knows where this darkness is from? Nobody knows. Only He knows, who is on the highest heaven, or maybe He also doesn't know. And this He doesn't know refers to that state when you are there. You do not know. So these people do not know, because they are there. But why they are there? What was the necessity to go so down, to fall so down into the darkness? It's another question. Is this part of the utility of the divine manifestation or not? Most probably it is, because nothing here happens without His sanction. Nothing.
Then what is the use or what is the necessity of personal sadhana, which is written even in the dining hall? Like, you cannot do our
You try not to do it, and you will fall into the darkness, and you will still follow your sadhana. There is no way you cannot follow your sadhana. Yes? Follow your sadhana means become conscious what is happening to you. More you are conscious, even if you are in the darkness, if you are conscious, you will do better. Better your work. If you are supposed to be in the darkness and you are more conscious, you will do better your work. That's all. Better means you you will know what is happening to you, and you will not be so miserable.
How will you explain about Hitler's
Hitler. Just the most difficult questions are coming. Hitler. How can I explain Hitler? Hitler believed, actually, you know, it was one of the mystics. He believed that he was doing the divine work. And he had someone who was coming to him, he was medium of one shining being with silver helmet, he was going into deep meditations for several days, hiding himself away from everyone, to communicate with this being. This being was the Lord of Nations, he called himself. That Asura of falsehood, as Mother says, who actually came as a reflection of that change which most probably Sri Aurobindo brought on earth, the touch with the supermind. And there was an other being which came in. And by the way, if you read his inner works, among them, they are speaking very mystic language. They speak about vril. It's a particular kind of energy which can sustain the whole world. He wanted to be an emperor, Hitler, an emperor who would balance the energy of the sun with the energy of the earth. They spoke such language that you would not believe it. So we know very little about Hitler. So it's not a common thing which happened because some greedy guy with stupid thoughts decided to destroy the world and build. He was speaking about Aryans. He wanted to populate the world with pure race. Pure race. He started to grow them, to breed them. He started to collect people from Poland and Prussia and found this particular measurement and started to produce them with which he wanted to populate the whole world. There will be no more rivalries, no more misunderstandings, other races will be wiped out, there will be only Aryans, you know. Look at this substitute for the higher ideal by Asuric force. Sri Aurobindo spoke also about the Aryans. But Aryans who are coming from the soul, not who are coming from the physical race and can be, you know, produced somewhere in the laboratories. So this was the shift, the twist. Well, we don't have to go into everything, but
when the person falls in the darkest level of consciousness and unable things also, when he decides or when he aspires to pick up, to grow out of it, since he is at the lowest level, to get to the journey towards the higher path, it would consume more time than anyone else to get to the higher planes. Then you also spoke about the arrangement of the circumstances that are made for that individual to reach to something. So, do you think that when the person at the lowest level aspires for the higher path, the arrangement would be such that the time to reach there would be reduced?
there is some mystery about reaching there, yeah? Because according to the Vedic view, there is the source of our all aspiration or our evolution is within the darkness, hidden. The sun hidden by the titans in the subconscious cave, which we have to discover. So if you go down, deep down, into the most inconscient density, and dig into it, as Sri Aurobindo says, I dig into this mud, into this rock. You have to break into this rock. There will be an opening of the eternal light, pure light. So it's not necessarily that you have to go only up, you know. There is something about it which, that knowledge was lost, and we are thinking only in terms that below there is darkness and above there is light. But in the Veda, if you take hymns to Savitar, to Savitri, to the sun, Savitar with two hands, he is embracing. With one hand he is pushing all the souls into manifestation, and with the other hand he is pulling them out of manifestation. With one hand he engages all the souls into the darkness of inconscient, and with the other hand he takes them out of the darkness. Such a movement. With two hands he embraces night, it is said. So there is no night at the bottom, there is a light of the sun. One hand is his hand of light, another hand is a hand of light, and night is taken into his embrace. Just think about it. It's a new paradigm which is, I'm sure it's difficult to maybe immediately see, but if you think deeper, you will find it very meaningful.
The person is already at a low level of consciousness. So even if he's trying to go down,
He,
deeper, he's not conscious.
no, he is not conscious on the surface, because the surface is this darkness. But within his psychic, within his depth of being, he is as divine as anybody else here. And that is the mystery. On the surface, yes, he is not conscious. We are, on the surface, who are more fortunate to be a little up, we think that we are more conscious. But we are very little more conscious. Nearly nothing in comparison to that guy who is digging those.
So, if that is the case, then even Hitler was divine, but he created so much of destruction. What is the use of that divinity?
The point is here that you're bringing ethical view, and speaking from the human point of view, of course you're right. There is no need to discuss it on this level. I'm speaking from the fundamental point of view. Everything in this world is of some utility to this consciousness. It can't be that that would have no place. You see, Hitler would not come into being if there would be no utility for it. It's a strange thing. We do not see it yet because we are full of this suffering we went through as a humanity. But if you look at the humanity before Hitler, you will see that, I don't want to justify everything, but I want to say that humanity changed through this ordeal to the extent which would not be possible in this short span of time. So this change, and that is the topic of our discussion today. As Sri Aurobindo says, the hell is the shortcut to heaven. So if you want to really come fast to that higher consciousness, you will have to go through ordeals. And that was the Second World War and the First World War and all these things.
All these arguments are coming from the assumption that everything happens in His will. But somehow it doesn't seem convincing to me.
That's very nice. That's very natural, and I think it should be like this. It's not really convincing until you really see. When you see that it cannot be otherwise, then your mind is changing and you start seeing, yes, it is not convincing on the level of ethical behavior or individual responsibility. It should not be convincing. You cannot justify these things on the level where we are. It becomes dangerous, because then we will produce many such creatures who would start doing the same, justifying everything by the divine. But it is true. Sri Aurobindo says, even in aphorisms, even one hair cannot fall from your head without sanction of the Supreme. You see, you just don't see it yet. That's okay, we don't see it.
Because the same set of incidents can also be explained with different set of explanations.
Yes, and it is all right. Once you see this, it doesn't contradict to me, because I see immediately from which level you are talking. You are shifting to one level from which you want to make a judgment or understanding, and it is valid from that level. And it is not contradictory to the higher level.
Is there not the danger, the slight danger of being insensitive
Oh, you are very right. By the way, you're looking at it from the mental structure of consciousness already, where individual is responsible for what is happening to him and others in society. And in that sense, the only conclusion can be made that this paradigm is a little bit tricky for us, because we lose our sense of responsibility, and we cannot help as we should help. But I'm not sure that we are seeing the whole picture yet. If we see the whole picture, we would really subscribe to this vaster view, because only then we can really get help. It seems that we cannot really help ourselves totally. We need help of the whole thing, of all the forces, of all the universal faculties of consciousness to interfere and to really liberate us from those things which you are referring to as pain and so on.
The thought came to me, this analogy of when we encounter in counseling or psychotherapy a client who is in pain. So as a therapist, I could empathize with the person. That doesn't in any way stop me from taking a meta perspective
Right.
in the process, holding the person and maybe helping or guiding the person. So me doing that doesn't in any way make my compassion towards the person's pain less.
Very nice point. Very nice.
compromised.
Very nice point. Moreover, I can even add that this meta perspective will help you to really see what is happening with the person. It is only with this meta perspective that you can find that real position of that pain, and will be maybe then to help the person. But because with a humanistic approach of only, trying to help, it would be something else. You will prescribe some medication, which is also all right. It is also part of the help, but not the holistic view, psychological view, which may help even more, because you hold a proper perspective. You don't need to say about it. You don't need to bring it to his awareness, but you can keep it for yourself as a secret vision of things.
And I have also experienced this tension coming when we find, for example, in marital counseling, say there is an abusive husband and a wife. So it's very easy to be empathetic in understanding and identify with the abused and the victim of the wife. Whereas if I take that stance that I'm going to lose the larger picture, where I take sort of an empathetic view towards the husband. It's not easy, but I think it's very important to be equidistant from both of them and also empathize with us. And it doesn't in any way sanction his behavior, whatever it is, but being able to hold the process. Know that the constant tension, both within and also outside. So to me, it's on a very micro level. I could see the analogy between that and what is
Very, very nice, yeah. But it's not only a distance. It's not only a distance which makes there is the whole now approach that you have to be distant. Counseling means you are no way giving any preference to anything. Yeah? This is the formula. So you stay separate, but it is even more. You see what is really going on. Not only you are indifferent to whatever happens, and with your indifference and peace you help them to find the answers, but also you find the answers within yourself, and in the language suitable for the person you may give hints, and it's an art in itself. But the Vedic vision helps, I'm sure about it. This vast view is not to be abused by a feeling of being irresponsible or feeling no pain for others. I think it is even more than that. You will feel more pain for others because you will see what is really happening. So it's also very interesting that we have to look into the concept of the sacrifice. Even in the Gita we have this statement where Sri Krishna says, to whoever you sacrifice, there you go. If you sacrifice to the gods, so to say, you go to the gods. Yeah? If you sacrifice to Pitris, to forefathers, to ancestors, you go to them. If you sacrifice to bhutas, to these spirits, creatures, you go to them. If you sacrifice to me, you come to me. So, and it makes me think the sacrifice is nothing but the direction of your consciousness, what you want to become. For example, you want to become a musician, you sacrifice to music, to the violin. You become violinist. You spend 6 hours, 8 hours a day with the violin, practicing it. It's a great sacrifice. You combine all your energies and faculties with this violin and thinking about it and practicing it, and over time you become a musician. The same with every direction of our becoming. So sacrifice can be seen as the becoming. What you want to become, there you share your energies with. You want to share your energies with the devatas, they will come and they will share your consciousness. And you want with the Krishna, he will come and share his consciousness with you. So this sacrifice is a very important device. Yes, just. Yes, but he says that it is when you do it unknowingly, avidhi purvakam. So when you do it without properly knowing, that's what I was referring to, these lower beings. They do not know that they do sacrifice. They think they waste their life. But actually it is not so. There is something happening there in spite of them knowing it. So there are two views, yes? But they go to that level of consciousness with which they identified themselves. Yeah? But the sacrifice is still taking place and he is partaking of it as the supreme behind everything, because he is in the heart of everyone, partaking of that sacrifice. Wherever you are, you may think that you are a great being, you achieved so much in life, but if you don't sacrifice, Mother says, whatever your achievement is, you are absolute zeros for the divine purpose. So, it's another statement to think about. So it's an interesting view. Wherever you go, whoever you sacrifice, what kind of energies you want to share with, to become part of that environment, you are becoming that. So you can become anything and everything. And it's good news for us, because that is the process by which we can become something we want to become.
How do we explain free will in this system?
Free will. Where is free will in all this? This is the free will. You move in any direction. Want to become identified with devatas, gods, you become godly for a moment because you share, you sacrifice with them. You want to sacrifice to bhutas, lower beings, you become lower beings. You can be anything and everything in this world. You can direct your will wherever you want and become that.
What I mean to say was, since everything is crystal, so there is the will of an individual.
And that is the development of individual. You will slowly become aware that actually you can be anything. And that is individual growing. Huh?
One can say that the divine spark is actually not working from out there, it's also in
Yeah.
inspiration. So that is my freedom also. That freedom is also my freedom. So there is no compatibility between agitatalism and freedom. Because it is me. The aspiration is a manifestation of that freedom.
This is a very good explanation. The divine is the spark within us, and that will of the divine is also our will. And it is very true. It's only in the Indian philosophy, so to say, we can find that explanation. Unfortunately, in other philosophies where the divine is completely transcendental, His will is something else, it's imposed on man, and man has to fear it and to follow it, otherwise he will be punished, yeah? As we take it from Abrahamic religions. But here we have the divine among us, within us. It is the divine who is suffering all the change. It is the divine who is going down into the darkness. It is the divine who is darkness and absence of consciousness.
To give an analogy for what you're saying, it's like a journey has begun. Even the Vedas considers this as a journey, where the starting point is known and the end point is known. And something in us knows which is the highway. But the individual, there is enough freedom for the individual to choose which road they will take to reach the end.
This view I understand. But there is also
like
a
that.
statement that nothing happens without a will. Then these two things seem contradictory.
Yes, definitely they will be contradictory to our consciousness involved here as individual consciousness. But if you widen the scope of your view and become universal in vision, you will see that everything is managed by the very presence of that consciousness, which, manages all the bits of these individuals in a very coherent and meaningful development towards some goal, towards the manifestation of the divine. It may seem like dancing, it's dance, a few steps forward, 3 steps back, and so on and so forth. You do not understand why it does it, because we are restricted in our view. But if you would have that wider vision, you would see why it does it. Because other elements are not ready, it has to take into account that portion, this is becoming already prepared, then it has to take into account this. You do not see the whole logistics of the thing. We do not see it. And because we don't see it, we say it's contradictory. It's really not possible. But we are not having that consciousness yet. And it is impossible. And it is very nice to be true to ourselves and to say this, that it is, we do not see how it works, because we do not see. But it doesn't mean that we will not see. We will see one day, and then we will know. Because somebody already saw and told us this. And we have to aspire to really see it. That's the purpose of the Veda. The Veda is knowledge we do not have, but it is given to us that we may have it. It is helpful. It is tuning us to some higher possibility of knowing, and we are growing slowly into it.
It would also be said that in some way, moment by moment, we are co-creating that will, what we call as his will.
Yes, we are projection of that will, and that will is not something constant, which is like staying unchanged. It is playful. And someone was objecting to Sri Aurobindo, saying that you predicted some events to happen and they didn't happen. How come? And he explains, and it's very interesting. He says, those forces were not there which cancelled this event. So the thing is that first it was projected and then it was modified. When then? Afterwards. That means there was other application of will. The divine is constantly, actively engaged in creation. And in that sense there is no, from our mental plane we think that it has to be constant decision which we all follow, and that's how we understand will, which is sanctioning everything. No, it is sanctioning every happening before it happens and modifies its movement. So that's why we do not see how it is really happening, because it is constantly living will of the living being. It's not predicted on one plane that you can see everything as it should be and will happen inevitably. Even on the level of Trikala Drishti, where you see 3 times, yes, these are only the events which are principally projected. The details are not worked out. and shouldn't be. And that's the beauty of it. The beauty of the unknown. There is always the element of the unknown, which is the beauty of it. Yeah? I cannot answer for him totally, but I can think in that direction.
Sometimes we ask a lot of questions, and I just want to make sure that we get to hear all of what you wanted us to know.
Right, but sometimes questions are more important than... Well, of course, I prepared the whole presentation, which I didn't even start yet. It was a, yes, entry into the sacrifice concept, but it was interesting to see that it makes sense to all of us. If it doesn't, please say. It's important that you say what you think. So change and self-development. There are two views, that you start from yourself, you change yourself, you change the world, you're responsible for everything. This is the individualistic approach, which comes with monotheistic religions, by the way, with teachers at the head of these religions, Buddha and so on, Mahavira, Jesus. They will bring all this monotheism because they will bring the view of the individual. The religion which was before, Vedic religion, is not monotheistic because there is no teacher who will tell you how things are from his individual perspective.
I want to clarify one thing. Buddhism and Jainism are not monotheistic religions. There are in fact no religions. Mahavira was just one of the person who has given his teachings. So let's not combine what Jesus has said, Buddha has said, and Mahavira has said.
Yes, they are not monotheistic religions. Technically speaking, they are not even religions. They are rather psychologies. But if you apply more philosophical or metaphysical view, you will see that what is monotheism in general, yes? There are no theistic religions. There is no God, so you cannot say that they are monotheistic. I am monistic, how to say, monistic rather. There is some fundamental view on reality as one. And all this happens through the psychology of the individual, where he attains to it. This is, I would rather say, they are in the mental structure of consciousness, already perceived. Yes, you're right. Thank you for correction. They are not monotheistic religions. I meant in a vaster sense, all religions inclusive, that they all appeared in 500 BC approximately, all of these movements, and created monotheistic religions. So change and self-development, the concept of the sacrifice. It is always done in accordance with the divine will. The divine will which is involved. Agnina rayimashnavat posham eva dive yashasam viravattamam. It is by Agni that you have to achieve this wealth, this growth day by day. By Agni himself, not by other means. By this growing divinity within, that you have to come to this growth, yashasam, and this fame, viravattamam, full of the heroic force. Now, there is a way to achieve it differently, not through Agni, but through the concentration of ego and creativity and so on and so forth, and the Agni will not be there in that sense as fully consciously force which is driving the being. That's why it is emphasized that by Agni alone you have to do it, and not by other means. There is also the concept of the dynamic truth in the Veda, which got lost in the later development, in the later philosophical thought of post-Vedic literature. It is Ritam called. Ritam is the dynamic truth. And that's why Rishi says, Ritam vadashyami, Satyam vadashyami, Why he says both, I will speak the truth, I will speak the truth, because they are translated as synonyms. Truth, ritam, truth, satyam. But these are two different truths. One is dynamic truth, another is static truth, what is. So the truth what is satyam, from root as, to be, and the truth ritam is from root ri, to move, to become. So there is a becoming truth, and that becoming truth was lost in post-Vedic literature. There is no more concept of the dynamic truth. Now, the whole karma yoga is based on this understanding of the dynamic truth. It's a very interesting issue, karma yoga in general, because it seems that karma yoga is the mystery, and a very difficult to solve mystery. And as in the Gita, Sri Krishna says that he brought this yoga once to the Vivasvat, to the Lord of the Sun, and he gave it to Ikshvaku, to the first king of the Sun dynasty, and so on. And in time this yoga became lost. Nashtama bhavat. I can even quote, but Sak kalene hamahata yogo nashtav parantapa. So this yoga became lost in time. Sa evayam mayate diya yogav proktav puratanah bhakto sime sakha cheti rahasyam hyetatuttamam. And this yoga I tell you again, because you are my bhakta, to Arjuna. So he brings this secret, and the whole fourth chapter is dedicated to the sacrifice and the meaning of the sacrifice. And this is exactly what karma yoga is about. There is a dynamic process of the unfolding of the divinity within the activities of man, which was overlooked and left behind by the post-Vedic literature because this dynamism could not be fulfilled. Humanity was not ready for this. And Sri Aurobindo says it is due to the failure, and I'm quoting, this is his word, failure of Vedic rishis to transform earthly life, because humanity was not ready. So the whole turn of spirituality took the direction towards the absolute bypassing the dynamic realms. Nature itself was seen as an obstruction, as the imprisonment for the soul, which we have to get rid of as fast as we can, to get back to that self where we came from. But as Sri Aurobindo says, heaven we always possessed, it is earth we never possessed. So what is the point of going back to that place where we are coming from? What was the purpose of really manifesting anything here if we are to leave it as soon as possible and to come back to that place where we came from, to our spiritual reality? So that can't be the purpose. And in his Savitri says, what is the purpose in the stars? That's beautiful. Was there any purpose in all this manifestation if that was only to leave it? Must be something more to it. So the direction of spirituality took the turn towards the absolute, and the whole development of yoga was made in such a way that we have to become more and more immobile. And the whole development of Yoga Sutras is to take that stand, immobile position, asana, where you have to be immobile for a long time, close your eyes, go within, to become perceptive of the reality which is beyond, because when you become active, you lose that perception. So the whole development took place that we have to go within, and that means we close our eyes, we have this mysterious smile of Buddha's face, and with closed eyes You go within, because otherwise we cannot reach the divine. We cannot reach if we are active. We can be either active or perceptive. We cannot be both for some reason. When we become active, we are not perceptive anymore. So how to solve that mystery? So in the Vedas there was a solution. And in the Gita he gives solution as karma yoga. It is by doing action, and Mother also says the same. It is, Auroville is for those who want to do karma yoga. That means to take activity, action, and to make it a means for your yoga. Action itself becomes a means of yoga, of finding the divine. But it is very difficult to understand how to do it. How to make action, how to be active and perceptive. It's nearly impossible for us. It's much easier to close our eyes, to go into complete silence and non-activity, and then to penetrate and to go deep inside to see that presence of consciousness, to have it, then to be active and to have that presence of consciousness. It's a big question. So I want you to have this perspective, because that will be the entry to the importance of the Vedic sacrifice. How they really arranged that knowledge, that the activity can be part of the process of the unfolding of consciousness. Yes. Yes, and it should be done somehow, especially for us who already separated spirit from matter so much that we cannot even imagine that both can go together. And the same question was in the conversations with Pavitra. Pavitra asked Sri Aurobindo, how can I be perceptive? In the meditative state, it goes well. I can feel the presence and so on. But when I am active outside, I'm losing this perception. How can I maintain this perception? Especially when I'm going into the subjects which I am interested in, like mathematics or something, then I'm completely forgetting that presence. And Sri Aurobindo says that you have to slowly bring that perception slowly into the mundane activities which are not interrupting the perception, and train yourself to remain in that perception while doing things. That's why Mother assigned many activities to the ashramites, like washing dishes, doing all this kind of service work, because they could maintain the perception through the repetitive activities. It's easier to do it first like this, and then to go into more interesting subjects. It's a way. But first you have to have the perception, and then to bring it into the activities and slowly establish it there. It's also part of the karma yogic vision.
So in this process, first one is having perception, and then one is trying to say begin to the behavior and doing something. But it may be a wrong understanding. The kind of conception which I had about karma yoga was while doing something and developing the perception. That is not the case?
Yes, it is. It is that and that. Remember and offer, for example, is again karma yogic formula. Remember, that means connect with the presence, and then take the activity and offer to it. Yes? It is not contradictory to what you say. You cannot do activities and suddenly discover some consciousness there. You must have some consciousness before doing the activity. Otherwise, you may discover something altogether different. Because there are infinite possibilities of consciousness here, on all the levels. Yes, I'm coming to the end, unfortunately, and there is the whole section I wanted to show you how it was in the Veda, but most probably we will have the whole hour tomorrow, and I will show you the whole scheme, how all the devatas are relating and how this sacrifice is done. Maybe to finish for today would be also to have a look into this first hymn of the Rig Veda. It's a good thing to end with. Just to give you a view of the first line of the Rig Veda. There are two interesting hymns in the Rig Veda. This is the first and the last. The first is like a seed in which you can see the whole picture of the sacrifice. And the last is as a message to all the humanity what is to be done. And in the middle, all the processes are taken. So, since many of you know the first hymn of the Rig Veda, and especially first line, I would refer to it. It would be easier for us to dwell on. So the line runs like this. I will read to you differently. Agnim ile purohitam yajnasya devam ritvijam hotaram ratnadhatamam. I adore flame. I adore the divine will. I approach, I seek the divine will with adoration. I seek the divine will with adoration, with love. Purohitam. Put in front the leader of our journey who is in front of our evolutionary march. He leads us. He is in front. Purah hitam. Yajnasya devam. The shining being, the luminous being, the God of our sacrifice. The shining being of our transformation and change. The leader of our journey. The God of our change. Ritvijam, the one who knows proper time for every change and transformation, who sees all the successions of processes which are necessary to achieve certain transformation, who knows a proper time when it is to be done. Ritu Ij, the one who in time knows how to do it, not only in principle, but also in the dynamisms of unfolding in the evolutionary process. Hotaram, the one who invokes all the universal forces, the summoner of the gods, the one who brings, who demands, who wills the divine forces, those forces who are not involved, who brings the uninvolved forces into the being, who involves uninvolved divine universal forces, forces of consciousness. He involves uninvolved forces. Ratnadhatamam, bestowing the greatest riches upon us. And it is not said upon whom, upon all of us, upon the gods and man, both. Because both are benefiting by this interaction. And as it is said in the Gita, Prajapati first created this world, and with that he created this sacrifice. It's interesting. I think it's the third chapter. Sahayajñav prajav strishtva purovacha prajapatih anena prasavishyadhvam eshavo stvishtakamaddhuk. Together with sacrifice, the Lord created all these creatures. and said, by this, by the sacrifice, you grow. You make yourself grow. Prasavishyadhavam. Esha vaha. This is for you. Ishtakamadhuk will be the cow of all your desires. You will reach all your desires by this sacrifice. Devan bhavayatanena te deva bhavayantu vah parasparam bhavayantah shreyah param avapsyatha. Devan bhavayata. Support by this the gods. And these gods will support you in return. And thus, supporting each other, parasparam bhavayantah, shreyah param avapsyatha. You will reach the highest good. Now, what I'm saying, the highest good, is exactly this, that he, Ratnadhatama, he bestows the highest treasure on all the creatures, gods and man, because it is by the sacrifice that the uninvolved forces get involved and evolve out of it to the higher vision of the Supreme. And man also is growing into the higher vision of the Supreme as his agent here. So it is in this, on this optimistic note, we can stop today and have our tea break.